macromolecules. So carbohydrates, the four main categories: carbohydrates, protein, lipids, and nucleic acids. So where can you find most of the biological macromolecules? Well, just check the back of any nutrition label. You find the biological macromolecules that provide nutrition. So again, when you have carbohydrates, that's their sugars, and then your protein is protein, and then fats or lipids, again, they're the same, just referring to the category. So you might see that fats in our American labels, and cholesterol is included, but I'll get to that in a bit. And nucleic acids, do you see nucleic acids anywhere on this right here? No, you don't see nucleic acids because nucleic acids don't really provide any sort of caloric nutrition. So they don't really provide energy. In weird circumstances, especially extreme starvation, maybe they can, but they don't. In typical life. So macromolecules. So macro meaning big and big molecules, right? So what are they? They're complex structures, but complex structures of what? So they're polymers, so a chain of molecules with a repeating structure. So a polymer, you take the same chemical and then you daisy chain it or branch it off into many, many linked repeating units of that same molecule. So say this poor guy who's social distancing himself is say he's some sort of subunit of a polymer. Well, when you have a polymer, you have repeating units of the similar molecule all across and linked together somehow. So this is a single subunit, and this is a polymer that repeats itself over and over again. Alright, so carbs, proteins, and nucleic acids, they do form polymers. And why are polymers important and these macromolecules important? Macromolecules are how they're stored, and also when you eat your food, this is typically how they are. They're macromolecules. So you have to go from these big molecules and particles and somehow break it down to smaller molecules that your cells can actually use. And fatty acids and lipids, they are important in nutrition, but they do not form long daisy chains like you saw in that previous picture. So macromolecular polymers for carbohydrates. So then, again, single carbohydrates. Here we have a monosaccharide. A monosaccharide, mono meaning one, saccharide is another term for sugars. So it's just one sugar by itself. That's a monosaccharide. So when you have two, it's what we call a disaccharide. So like diverging meaning into two paths. So it's, again, we have two carbohydrates, that's a disaccharide. Then when you have many saccharides put together, that's when you have, remember, just like things like polyuria, that means many urine, much urine. Same with carbohydrates. Poly means many, so many carbohydrates is a polysaccharide. So are there different ways? So as long as you have many carbohydrates chemically linked together, you have a polysaccharide. There are different ways of arranging it. So when you have a single linear chain of carbohydrates and glucose, that's what we call amylose. So but without any branches, just a single chain right here. But in your body, and when you have starch from plants, there's typically actually not a single linear chain. It actually branches off. And so starch and glycogen, these, instead of being a linear chain, they tend to branch off. And what's the difference? Well, one, you produce glycogen. So when you have too many or too much sugars, this is how you store sugar in your liver. You can make glycogen, and you can also make glycogen in your skeletal muscle as well. Do you make starch? Not unless you're a plant, but it's a very important storage form of glucose for plants. And what can you do? Break down starch, get glucose, and then if your body wants to store it for later, convert it to glycogen, and if you need glucose, break it back down into glucose. So that's why these polymers are very important. They're storage forms of these macromolecules. So again, what's another difference? Well, starch tends to be a little more branched. All right, so then proteins. So then we have 20 different amino acids. So amino acid, so 20 with the asterisk. If you're taking like bio 270, or I always forget if it's 265 or 275. But cell molecular biology, they talk about the proteinogenic amino acids. So these are the ones that can form proteins. There are rare and important, but also rarer amino acids that are more exotic. Don't worry about for this class. Just for this class, know about the 20 basic amino acids that make proteins. So amino acids are linked together by peptide bonds. And what happens if you have many amino acids linked by many peptide bonds? hey, remember that prefix that we talked about many saccharides put together? So when you have many peptide bonds in a row with a big, linking all these amino acids, that's what you call a polypeptide, right? So a polypeptide, why? There's many peptide bonds linking amino acids. All right, so hemoglobin, so what do we have here? So protein chains, and again, all of these are polypeptides. So hemoglobin is made out of 4 polypeptide chains. It's not actually one continuous link of amino acids, and this is why they call it tertiary or quaternary structure. Why? You actually have all these polypeptides, but 4 polypeptides making a final complete protein. All right, so then you have nucleic acids. So nucleic acids, even though they don't don't contribute significantly to nutrition, just a little review, they do form polymers. So like DNA and RNA, they take these, what we call nucleobases right here, and nucleotides, and they link them together. So what we have, this is how why this sequence of these bases actually determines the information. It encodes all the information of how to synthesize proteins, how to replicate itself. So again, this is how it's able to store information. Just like your computer is able to store information in bits and bytes, this is the same thing. You have this sequence of information. So it's kind of like this. This has information, right? So the backbone is the same, and it's all linked together, but just by differences in the letter itself, it has a meaning. So same with the bases in a nucleic acid. All right, so fats and lipids. So they are important for nutrition, but what about macromolecules? So you have fatty acids and triglycerides and cholesterol. So these are all fats and lipids, and what's the difference? Well, the first two are related. So do lipids form polymers? I'll get to that real soon. So then you have glycerol and fatty acids. So glycerol is actually also known as glycerin, and especially in pharmacy, they might call it glycerin, glycerine, same thing. Glycerol is this, and it's actually hydrophilic, but we might get to that later. So then you have fatty acids. So fatty acids, what we have here is a long chain, these black balls right here. This is representing carbon. So the thing about a fatty acid is a long carbon chain. It does have hydrogen attached to it as well, but this is what the main thing is I want you to gain from this class. These fatty acids have a lot of carbon. Carbon is what your cells one of the things your cells metabolize and harvest the energy from to make ATP. But we'll get to that when we get to metabolism in chapter 25. All right, so fatty acids. Why do I bring up glycerol? Well, this is how you make a triglyceride. You actually take 3 fatty acids. So this is a tricky thing. So it says, okay, so tri meaning 3. But when you have a triglycerol, it's not 3 glycerols. It's actually saying 3 fatty acids. So this is where the tri comes from. So you attach fatty acids to glycerol. So when you have glycerol plus 3 fatty acids, that's when you get a triglyceride. So again, do not think it's 3 glycerol. It's actually 3 fatty acids. So the great thing is that your cells can store fatty acids as triglycerol, but if it wants to metabolize a fatty acid for energy, it can actually do the opposite. It can break apart a triglyceride into glycerol and fatty acids, metabolize the fatty acids into energy. So again, this is why these macromolecules are very important. All right, so do fatty acids do this? Do they form a polymer? And they don't form an infinite. So the thing about polymers, in theory, they can actually extend to infinity if they have enough of these subunits. But fatty acids do not do this. Maybe in some weird artificial, in the test tube chemical reaction, they can do this, but in your body, they do not do this. So fatty acids do not form these polymers. At most, you can have 3 linked together, but again, they have to be linked together via glycerol. They are not directly linked to each other like this. And then here's cholesterol. So cholesterol, it also doesn't form polymers, so you won't see this. This does not happen. So cholesterol does form bigger molecules, but they are not directly linked together like we have with monosaccharides forming a polysaccharide or amino acids forming a polypeptide. So there are enzymes. So remember, enzymes are important for chemical digestion. You're chopping up all the food into smaller particles. Now you have these big molecules, but how do you convert it into something small that your cells can use for energy and to repair themselves or create new cells? So Here we have amylases. Amylases catabolize carbohydrate polymers. So you can remember amylose, that linear carbohydrate polysaccharide structure. So amylases carbon, and again, that ASE, dead giveaway that chemical is an enzyme. So proteases, hey, ASE, another enzyme. What do you think those digest? Hey, at least it's pretty obvious from that one, right? They catabolize polypeptides, these proteins. And then what's left? Now we have, hey, lipases, lipids, right? Lipids and fats. So these catabolize triglycerides. They do not break apart cholesterol. And nucleases, they catabolize nucleic acids, but again, they chop it up. But can nucleic acids really be used for energy? In dire situations, possibly, but again, it's not typically in a healthy person. So again, carbohydrate. So these are the values you will use. I'm pretty sure fission and nutrition use these values as well, so I'm going to keep it consistent with them. So carbohydrates, so when we're talking about calories, it's like, okay, per gram of carbohydrates, you get 4 calories. The actual value does have decimal points, but again, if you're taking the multiple choice test, you won't have a calculator, so I'm keeping it simple. And this is also consistent with your nutrition classes. Proteins, again, 4 kilocalories per gram. Fatty acids, so again, this has more calories. So again, more than twice the calories of carbohydrates or proteins, weight for weight. And again, energy from cholesterol is negligible. And why is that? So you might notice that cholesterol is always included in your nutrition labels, but does it have a caloric value? So the thing is that these fatty acids, notice that they're very long and linear. So the thing about your cells and enzymes and your mitochondria, they're able to chop up that carbon chain into small usable bits. Now remember, cholesterol, remember the 3 hexagons and a pentagon? So it's very hard compared to a very linear part, it's very hard for your cells to actually chop up that and break all those rings that make up the structure of cholesterol. So your body doesn't really use cholesterol as an energy source. It is important for making things like steroids, your cell membranes, but nutritional value is pretty negligible as well. Nucleic acids, again, pretty negligible unless you have something weird. So again, cholesterol is listed there, but does it actually have calories? Not really, because again, you just excrete it. And the thing is, why do they include it on nutrition labels? Well, again, if you have high cholesterol, that puts you at more risk of atherosclerosis and other metabolic diseases, and also liver disease. So that's why they include it, even though it actually doesn't contribute to calories itself.